So what do the numbers on a camera lens mean? You want to find out? Then you won't want to miss a single second of this video. Hey, it's Tiggi on Habanero. If you're new to this channel, thanks for stopping by. And if you're returning, great to see you again. If you want more movie making tutorials like this one and tips, be sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when I post new videos. And by the end of this video, you'll be able to translate what these numbers mean, not only know what they mean, but you'll be able to understand how your camera lens is going to behave or perform. So what do these mean? Are they the candies we all love? No. Are they this guy? No. What the M&M means on any lens is millimeters, and it is the amount of millimeters for the focal length. This lens that I'm actually shooting on right now, it is a 14 to 42 millimeters. And on this lens, as you can see, this one has a range. This is considered a telephoto lens. Keep in mind that not all lenses have a range. A common lens is called a prime lens, and it is, not always, but a common one, a popular one we should call it, is a 50 millimeter lens. A 50 millimeter lens is considered to be closest to the human eye. The numbers before the millimeters are the actual distance between the lens and the sensor, the camera sensor. Riddle solved. Now we know what the numbers mean. The bigger the numbers, the more zoom the lens has. And this is how we start getting into how it is going to perform on your camera. So the lower the millimeters, the smaller the number of the focal length, the wider the angle of the lens. So a 24 millimeter lens or less is considered to be a wide angle. To get a blurry background, you need to use a very wide angle lens, which means that the millimeters of the focal length are going to be very low. What does it mean when you've got numbers that are around the rim of the lens that are separated by a colon? You ask. Well, these are the aperture, and if there's two numbers, then that is the aperture range. And our aperture is the gateway to the camera that lets the light in. Let me know in the comments below what the numbers are on your camera. Is it a wide angle? Is it a telephoto? Let me know. And be sure that you watch the other videos that are in this playlist. Now, here is where it can get kind of tricky, because the lower the aperture, and we're going to talk about what the numbers, the actual numbers here in a moment. The lower the aperture, the more light is actually being let into the camera. The higher the number, the less light that's going to be let in to the camera. A 1/2 or an f/2 is more light. Say an f/16 is less light. You will hear aperture described as speed. Let's review that. What is that? A slow lens means a narrower aperture. The word slow comes into this because what that means is you need to use a slower shutter speed so you can let enough light in. So a fast lens is a wider aperture. You're letting more light in. So what that means with the speed is you need to use a faster shutter speed, because you don't want to have your shot overexposed by too much light. So what does this mean to you? and your shots. How is your lens going to perform when you get it on your camera? Well, we're almost there. Now we know what the numbers mean, and now we know how they can affect aperture. But what's that mean when you get it on your camera? Well, let me introduce you to crop factor. The focal length of the lens, which we've already talked about, it's our millimeters, the numbers in front of the millimeters, never changes. So if you have a 14 to a 42 millimeter lens, that's what it is, unless you're shooting with a crop frame camera, like I am. I'm using a micro four thirds. What changes is because it's a crop frame camera, the sensor is smaller, and because of that, it's going to have a magnifying effect. So if you really want to dial in how a lens is going to behave, let's say a 35 millimeter lens, on a full frame camera, it's going to be 35 millimeters. So I'm using a Lumix G7. It is a micro four thirds sensor. And how it's going to play, let's call that, with a 35 millimeter lens is, this is where the crop factor comes into play. It is going to magnify what that lens is seeing by a factor of 2. So if you're trying to figure out whether you want like a wide angle shot or a telephoto shot, then you need to remember, like in my case, the micro four thirds, I have to remember that with say a 35 millimeter lens, with the lens I'm using right now, which is a 14 to 42, I have to remember that I need to multiply that range by 2. So my range is actually a 28, I hope I'm doing the math right, a 28 by 84 range. And you can check me on that math. I think that's right. And be sure you check out the other videos in this playlist. They're going to help you get started, and if you're already started, help you out with becoming a better movie maker.